And welcome to the UCF Knights on SI YouTube channel. This is a first for the channel. This will be our first interview video, and I am very honored to welcome our first guest on the channel. He's a great friend of mine, and he is the Joe Lunardi, I would say, of college softball bracketology. He's with D1 Softball. Welcome to the UCF Knights on SI YouTube channel, Eric Lopez. Eric, how you doing?
Doing all right, Bryson. Honored to be your first guest. Hopefully, goes up from here. Hopefully, you could raise the bar after this. But otherwise, doing good to catch up with you once again.
Absolutely. I don't know if I'll be able to do that from a college softball expertise standpoint. You've been following college softball for quite a long time now, to the point where you're one of the biggest bracketology names in the sport. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk to you about this Tallahassee Regional that the UCF Knights softball team has found itself in its sixth consecutive NCAA tournament appearance. So I want to hear your thoughts, first of all, because you, of course, are the play-by-play announcer for the Knights normally on ESPN Plus. So you follow this program for quite a long time. So what's it like to see the Knights get this regional in NCAA for a sixth straight time and going back to a place like Tallahassee?
Well, let's start with the six straight NCAA tournament appearances. I think that's an awesome honor. I mean, you know this. Not too many UCF athletics sporting programs have done six straight NCAA tournament appearances. I think we can count that in one hand, probably, if we really got to crunch things. I remember you and I kind of looked into that about a year ago when they made it to the fifth straight one. So I think that's something that you cannot dismiss. I think that's a heck of an honor, especially as this program has transitioned from the American to the Big 12 and just finished their best Big 12 season from a overall record standpoint. 14-9-1 in the Big 12, finished fourth in the Big 12, best in the 3 years that they've been to the Big 12. So I think those are very big positives that I think get overlooked sometimes. As far as Tallahassee, I wasn't surprised. I had a feeling, in fact, on my bracketology on D1 softball, I had UCF slated to play the 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. The difference was I thought UCLA would be the 9 seed and Florida State would be the 8 seed. It turned out to be that UCLA was the national 8 seed, FSU was the national 9 seed. But I knew, and I even tweeted this out, Bryson, on early Sunday afternoon, is I told UCF fans that basically the key was because I knew the seeding. UCF was going to be in that 21 to 24 range seeding. I checked it on Monday on the bracket as I studied it. I think UCF was 22 or 23 seed based on how the committee set this up. But I told everybody it's going to come down to where is FSU seeded. If FSU was seeded eighth or better, then UCF was going to travel. If FSU was seeded ninth or 10th or 11th in that pecking order, in whatever order, UCF was going to bus to FSU. And the reason for that is there's a caveat. This year, the committee in softball is seeding 32 teams for the first time. The caveat is that if you're in a group of 4 teams that they call buckets or deals, where UCF
Odds.
was pods. Thank you, Bryson. If you're in that group of pods, like for example, UCF was in a pod that was with the 9, 10, 11, and 12 seed, it's not automatic that, hey, the 21 seed plays the 12 and the 13, the 11 plays to 22, etc. If there is a team that you can bust to, like in this case, UCF could bust to Florida State, you're automatically going to go there. So it's not a true 32 seeds. I think it is better than what we've had. But unfortunately for UCF, it's a situation where you just happen to be caught in the same pod as Florida State, so you were automatically going to get paired up. No different, by the way, than Georgia, for example, hosting Clemson. Same situation, Clemson busing to Georgia. That's why the FSU seeding was so key in this, Bryson, because I really do believe had FSU gotten the 8 seed, that UCF would probably be right now booking a flight to Los Angeles to play UCLA in that regional, which is what I projected on D1 softball.
Hmm. Well, I mean, UCLA does sort of factor into UCF's playoffs because the Los Angeles regional winner is going to play the winner of the Tallahassee regional. So if the Knights do end up finding their way out of this, they're going to likely play somebody from that regional. Obviously, this is a little presumptuous, but considering your national coverage of college softball, just what were your thoughts on what the Los Angeles Regional ended up being.
No surprise there. What's funny is I had projected South Carolina to go to the 8 seed bracket, which I had them going to Florida State. Instead, they go to UCLA. So you flip it. If you flip them, it would have been the same situation there. So I actually kind of not surprised. Cal State Fullerton's a West Coast team. It's a 3 seed there. And then Cal Baptist, I nailed that. I hit all 64 teams, by the way, in my bracketology this year in 2026. I hit all 16 hosts. I hit up 31 out of 32 top 2 seeds. So I felt pretty good about it. I felt the committee did a pretty good job of it. Certainly UCLA is the heavy favorite there to get out of that regional and host whoever gets out of Tallahassee. So that is worth mentioning if UCF were to upset FSU and whoever else in the Tallahassee regional and get to the Supers for the second time in program history. I think it'll likely be in Los Angeles with UCLA. I will point this out. If UCF were to win the Tallahassee regional and South Carolina were to upset UCLA or anybody else in that regional for that matter, UCF would be the higher seed and basically have the right to host the super regional in that scenario.
That was something that I was intrigued to see after the advent of the new labeling system that the bracket used this time around. What were your thoughts about seeing a, six in front beside UCF's name? By the way, how does this UCF seating stack up to previous years?
Well, it's hard. It's different. Obviously, the NCAA's decided to go to a new format, seeding wise, similar to what they've done with volleyball and women's soccer, and they're going to do this with college baseball, where they seed them by quadrants, where there's 4 quadrants, and you seed them 1 through 8. You and I have argued about this off the air. I don't like it. I don't think it was needed to change. And part of a few reasons I don't like it, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but a couple of reasons is in soccer and volleyball it fits because the goal is to get to the Final Four. The goal is to get to the College Cup in soccer. The goal is to get to the Final Four in volleyball. That makes sense. Baseball and softball, their goal is to get to the World Series, which has 8 teams. So that's one issue I have. The other issue I have with this is because of this, the NCAA, because I reached out to the NCAA on Monday about this, they will not release the official seeding. So in other words, there is no public record of who was seeded 17 to 32. I think to me that's unacceptable. The NCAA men's basketball tournament, to their credit, and I believe the women do the same, still releases the seeding 1 through 68. They do not do that in soccer and volleyball, and they will not do that in softball. So to me, that's the other reason why I don't like this. And I feel like part of the reason why the committee agreed to this and probably for this is because they could hide around that and not get questioned on why certain teams were seeded where they were in the top 32. So that's a main reason I don't like the change on that. As far as to answer your question about UCF and where this ranks, certainly the highest seed they ever got was 2022, where they were the 16 seed. Part of the problem is they never seeded the 2 seeds as far as 32 seats until this year. So we don't have official records as far as, hey, where was UCF in the blueprint because they went by the 400-mile radius rule and all the other times that they hosted. What I can tell you is this is probably in all the 20 seasons I've covered every NCAA tournament they've had. This is probably the third highest RPI UCF team in the history of the program, behind the 2022 team and the 2015 team that had an RPI inside near the top 16, but did not host and was sent to Tallahassee.
Interesting. So speaking of Tallahassee, let's go ahead and dig into this regional field now, shall we? I want to save the best for last, aka the Knights breakdown, because we want to dig in, talk about keys. But I want to talk about who the Knights are going to have to contend with if they want to get out this regional. And I want to start with their first opponent on February on May 15th at 2:30 p.m. on ESPN Plus, Jacksonville State. Considering that they bear the name of a Florida city, they are not from Florida. They are from Alabama. But in a way, they're kind of an honorary Florida team this time around. It'll be interesting because this is the first time that UCF and Jacksonville State have played each other since 2007. So it's been quite a long time since these two teams have faced against each other. But Jacksonville State is no pushover of a team. They won the Conference USA tournament, and they have some pretty solidly ranked players when it comes to statistics as they're headed up by Coach Julie Boland. Just what's it been like following the Gamecocks this season for you?
So I interviewed Julie Boland before the season back in November, maybe December range, when I was doing a CUSA preview. You know, Liberty has been the dominant team there since they joined Conference USA a few years ago with the legendary gold medalist Dot Richardson as the head coach. Jacksonville State was the team that lost to Liberty last year in the championship game. They've had a good track record. They've changed conferences over the years. They used to be in the A-Sun, as a matter of fact, recently. They used to be in the OVC. Coach McGinnis, a longtime legendary coach at Jacksonville State. Julie Boland played for her. She was a shortstop at Jacksonville State. She's an alum. She was a longtime assistant coach who's now in her second year as a head coach. And I spoke to her back in the fall. And this was a team that brought back a lot of players from last year's team, led by Emma Elrod, who was the CUSA Player of the Year. She was on the D1 Softball Top 100 Players list for mid-major players in the country. And I think maybe overall as well. I don't recall back before the season. But they were a team that had unfinished business. They lost to Liberty in the championship game last year. That stung with them. That was motivation for them. Going into this season, they went in and rolled and won the regular season title. Got beat by Liberty in the CUSA tournament, had to come out of the losers bracket, got to the championship game, and then beat Liberty and got revenge, ironically turning the tables on Liberty on what Liberty did to them a year ago. So big for Julie Boland. It's a veteran team, but they haven't been in this stage as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned. So how do they handle the bright lights will be very interesting to see. They're not a team that hits for a lot of power, but they have a lot of speed. They get on base. And again, they have players that have played in big games. Emma Elrod, the junior out of Newman, Georgia, is certainly the hitter that makes them go. She is certainly one to watch in the offensive end. Not the only one, as I'm sure you'll read off some names here and some stats there, Bryson, here momentarily. And then their pitcher, the freshman, McKenna Moore. Out of Grain Valley, Missouri. I think she won Pitcher of the Year in CUSA. She was a difference maker for them because that was the big question for them. They had lost pitching experience through graduation from last year's team. They basically returned a lot of their veteran players back offensively and defensively, but who was going to step in pitching? And one of them, I believe, was McKenna Moore, who had a standout freshman year for them. So I think they're a really good team. I understand this is probably one that people are going to sleep on a little bit, but if you're UCF, you have to take this team very seriously. Jacksonville State's played a very difficult schedule. If you're UCF, you have to use your experience having played in the NCAA tournament, whereas Jacksonville State, some of these players haven't. You need to use that as your advantage if you're looking for one of the keys on that Friday game. But do not dismiss. I think this is a very solid Jacksonville State team that the UCF has their work cut out for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about how Jacksonville State doesn't necessarily hit for power in the sense that they hit home runs, but they do have hit for power in the sense of doubles because they are one of the nation's leaders when it comes to doubles. In fact, they're fourth in the nation in that, in fact, and part of that reason for that is a player by the name of Morgan Nowakowski, who's second in the nation with 24 doubles this season. Can you just talk about what kind of a batter that does for a pitching staff like that, and how you get around a batter like that, and how you can contend with that? Because yeah, they might not hit home runs, but they really know how to stack that at bats.
Well, and I think it's interesting because this Joanne Graff Field at home of FSU, it's a very doubles friendly park. It's not an accident Florida State hits a lot of doubles every year. That is a doubles friendly park. So I think Jacksonville State will like that. UCF hits a lot of doubles too. That's a key matchup, I think, if you look at it. Which team can limit the extra base hits? Not the singles. You limit them to singles. Don't give up doubles, triples, homers. I think is something to watch in this matchup here with the two teams that you're talking about. So, yeah, I mean, that's what makes Jacksonville State go. Now, they haven't seen, for example, they haven't faced a pitcher in CUSA as talented as an Isabella Vega, for example. They have faced Alabama's Jocelyn Brisky of the Alabama, who's one of the best pitchers in the country. So they have some familiarity with that. But that's, again, you make a good point. One of the keys for this UCF pitching staff is not give up free passes, but also not give up the extra base hit, the doubles and triples, because that is something that certainly Jacksonville State feeds off, is the extra base hit, the extra base offensively, because they're not one team that necessarily hits it out of the park, although they have some players, certainly have some pop, and if the wind's blowing out a little bit at Joanne Grant Field, certainly all bets are off, but definitely it's a very friendly park if you like hitting doubles, and both teams do in this particular matchup.
One aspect that Jacksonville State has not exactly been great at this year is double plays. They're 236 in the nation in double plays this season. When you look at Jacksonville State defensively, what do you do when you're the UCF offense when you see that kind of stat?
I don't know. There's a lot of things that go into play for that. Is your pitching staff could be more of an outfield pitching staff where they give up a lot of fly balls versus ground ball outs. So that also could influence that a little bit, the fly ball rate versus ground ball rate. One of the things that's helped UCF being among the best, most double plays turn is a lot of the UCF pitchers on the staff are ground ball pitchers. They induce a lot of ground balls. So maybe Jacksonville State just doesn't induce a lot of ground balls. Maybe they induce a lot of flyouts, but that's certainly, double plays has always been the pitcher's best friend, as the cliche goes. And for UCF, I think back to a couple plays in the Kansas game where they got Kansas turned a double play that prevented a big inning for UCF. So those are things that you want to stay away from if you're UCF's offense, because I think UCF will have success hitting against most of the opponents here this weekend in Tallahassee, but you can't leave runners on. You can't leave opportunities to go to waste, kind of like they did in the Kansas game, where I thought they had a chance to blow that game open, and they kept Kansas hanging around and allowed the Jayhawks to make the comeback that they did in the Big 12 tournament.
I want to go ahead and move on to the other mid-major team in this regional, the Stetson Hatters. The ASUN tournament champions are coming off what I would argue is probably one of their best games of the season, considering they had to beat number one seed Central Arkansas twice in the ASUN tournament to get their automatic bid to make it to this regional. They also played UCF in the regular season. It was quite a close game, and they played Florida pretty close in Gainesville, 3-2. So not exactly a Stetson team you want to overlook by any means. But what have you seen with the Hatters this season?
Well, I've seen a lot of Stetson, actually. You mentioned I called the game where UCF beat Stetson a few weeks back, where Lena Elkins got the victory there in that ball game. This is Stetson's best offense in program history. I saw Stetson clinch the ASUN regular season title 2 weeks ago in DeLand. I know Shelly Cousins very well, the head coach of the Hatters. She is actually a guest on the In the Circle on D1Softball podcast that came out on Monday. So check that interview out with Shelly Cousins. We talked about that championship that they had there. But she's done a great job building this program. She's a DeLand native. She's a multi-time ASUN Player of the Year as a player at USC Upstate when they were in the ASUN Conference, and she's just done a good job of developing players at Stetson. And really, offensively, Nicole Edmondson is the player to watch here. She is basically won the ASUN Triple Crown for batting average, home runs, and RBI. She was the Player of the Year in the ASUN. She's in the mix for Mid-Major Player of the Year. She set some ASUN conference records. I think Stephanie Best is the only player that has more home runs in a single season in the ASUN than Nicole Edmondson did this year. So that gives you all you need to know about how good she is, the first baseman Edmondson, who's a transfer out of a junior college or school. But she's not the only one. You got Irina Garcia, who's a talented shortstop. She's been all year a top 10 shortstop from a defensive player. when if those two teams pair up, you have two of the top 10 shortstops in defensive runs saved category, which is a metric that shows you the player, how many runs they save from playing that position versus an average position, an average player. And Aubrey Evans of UCF and Garcia of Stetson are two of the best shortstops when it comes to that. But Garcia can swing the bat very well. And they have other players that can hit the ball like Chumley and company. The biggest question for them most of the year was pitching. It got off to a bit of a rocky start this year, but you mentioned that ASUN tournament, the pitching kind of carried them. Bryson, and I thought that was, to me, the big story there with Haley Arnold, who I believe was the ASUN tournament MVP there, and then Ava Braswell. That's their 1-2 punch that pitches very well for Stetson. Interestingly, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong with the box score, but I want to say Braswell started the UCF game in Orlando, and then I believe it was Kennedy Temples that came in relief in that game. I don't remember if Haley Arnold pitched in that game or not. You can correct me on that. That even though that was a few weeks ago, it seems like ages ago for me. That's my age catching up. But their pitching got a lot better in the year, and that's how they were able to win the ASUN regular season and tournament title. And I would tell you this, Bryson, if you look at the whole field, I can make the argument. I had Stetson as a 3 seed in Tallahassee in my bracket. I could make the case that Stetson is probably the toughest 4 seed in the entire tournament. It's probably them and or UConn who won the Big East title. So FSU, if there's some good news for UCF in this, is that Stetson is not going to be a pushover for Florida State. And sometimes to win a regional on the road, you need a little bit of help. So let's say a Stetson were to upset Florida State and drop them to the losers bracket, and UCF were to win the game, that gives them a leg up perhaps. Again, not predicting that, but my point is it's not like Florida State has a cakewalk opening game.
You were right about Braswell facing the Knights, by the way. It was Braswell, Temples, and Haley Arnold that all pitched against UCF
All right, so
in
Arnold
that
must have,
regular season game.
Arnold closed the game then. That's what happened. And they went by committee because both teams were in a conference series coming up. So UCF saw all 3 pitchers in that game, Bryce, and that is significant because they'll probably see all 3 of them if they happen to play in Tallahassee this upcoming weekend.
One thing that's really stuck out to me about Stetson is they actually ranked 27th in the nation in home runs. One of the more powerful teams in college softball that you really might not expect when you first look at it, because they not only have Nicole, but they also have players like Logan Foreman, who is also an All-A-Sun player, and Garcia actually has a few home runs under her belt there as well. And then and then also what really sticks out to me is the pitching control that they have. They are 18th in the nation when it comes to the least hit batters, just 14 of them this season. What does that tell? What does those things kind of tell you about this Stetson team beyond the stuff that you already said?
Well, first of all, the home run, Stetson set the school record for both of these teams. Stetson, UCF set home run records this year in their program's history. So that tells you a lot. Stetson set a program record for Grand Slam home runs. She's got a lot of power, and that's the influence of Shelly Cousins, who was a power hitter herself as an All-American at USC Upstate. That is what she has brought to Stetson softball. It used to be that Stetson was a slap-hitting team, play the short game, get on base, move them over, and try to steal bases and manufacture runs. She has brought power to this offense, so that is all her on the fingerprints. As far as the pitching, those pitchers, they have worked on them throwing strikes and not giving up free passes, and part of that is not hitting batters as well. They have command, they have some control there, and I think that's helped them win the ASUN championship. Something to keep in mind. You know this from your experience in Tallahassee at baseball at Dick Howser Stadium. Would you agree that was a hitter's park when you were there? In that regional in baseball, because Joanne Graff Field is similar to Dick Howser Stadium. I have not been to a game at Dick Howser Stadium for a full game. I am hoping to change that this weekend because the FSU baseball team is at home hosting Miami, who I've seen plenty of this year, but that's a whole other plot line for another day. I do think it's a hitter's park, and it's going to be interesting if the teams like Stetson and UCF can take advantage of that by in that park and have success. And if they do, we could have a pretty high scoring regional.
I bring up the hit batters, Eric, because it's a really interesting contrast to UCF, who it ranks 273rd in the nation. They've hit 43 batters this year. You talk about free passes. I mean, I th- that's a real dichotomy, I think, between the Stetson and UCF when it comes to those things. When you look at UCF's pitchers, just what do these pitchers need to do in order to avoid these kind of free passes?
It's a great question. I would also tell you, I think Stetson has a more experience pitching, veterans. UCF is, this is, Bryce, I was thinking about this. I had a long 4-hour flight from Denver to Orlando to get back from the Big 12 tournament as I changed my flights and everything. And I was thinking about this. This is probably the youngest UCF pitching staff I've ever covered. Usually, and what I mean by that is normally there's an upperclassman that's thrown a lot of innings that has experience. Going back, this is my 20th season covering UCF. When I got to UCF, I first started covering it. Allison Kime was the ace, who's now, of course, a UCF Athletic Hall of Famer. When she graduated, Ashley Cole took over. She was a junior, so she was the ace for 2 years there, led them to the NCAA tournament in 2010. I think the only other pitching staff that this one reminds me of is the 2012 team that had a freshman by the name of Mackenzie Otis, who is in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame, had an incredible freshman year and really won co-pitcher of the year in CUSA. That was a very young pitching staff with a young team in general. It had a great recruiting class with Otis, Ferris Sullivan, Kaylee Novak, Maddie Schroeder, and they overachieved. They went from they helped build the team, get them back to the NCAA tournament that year. So that's the only other one I can think of that probably was younger than this pitching staff. And Mackenzie Otis that year carried that staff, eating up a good 75-80% of the games. A young lady by the name of Allie Schmidt was kind of the number two. She was a senior. She was a one-year transfer. But she had pitched, but came from a smaller school. But she had at least a lot of experience throwing innings and could eat up some innings if she need to, and she spot started there. This is a young staff and it showed by a lot of the hit by pitches that you've talked about and hit batters and the walks and the free passes. And I think back to and you wonder how are they going to handle this environment. I think back to the Big 12 tournament game against Kansas, Bryson, where Tori Payne, who has pitched really well, I thought, the last 3 to 4 weeks, gets her number called to come in relief for Isabella Vega, and she walked back-to-back hitters, got pulled from the game. You just can't do that in the postseason. Hopefully that's an experience learning moment for Tori, and I think it will. But that's part of it is you have Tori Payne's a freshman. Ava Stewie's a freshman. You have Reagan Vacoon, who's a freshman, correct? And then obviously Hildy Dempsey was a freshman who obviously got hurt with the injury and is out for the year, which also hurt this staff. So really, if you look at it, the only pitcher on this staff that has experience in postseason and has worked a lot of innings is Isabella Vega. Cochran and Macy Miles, two veteran arms, but haven't thrown a ton of innings in their career. They both have pitched in the regionals, so they may I think they'll be used in the regionals, but as far as the bulk of the innings, it's been Vegas. So I think you've seen some growing pains with this young pitching staff, which still ranks very high. I believe they're in the top 20 still in hits, allowing base hits per 7 innings. ERA is still, I think, top 30 in the country. Batting average against is still, like, if you look at the stats, you'd be surprised. The staff has pitched better than it feels, but the reason why we don't think of that is because what's hurt UCF's pitching staff is when you give up free passes, 2, 3, 4 walks, or hit by pitches like you talk about, that usually comes back to haunt you, and you give up a couple of runs on a base hit, and that's how it hurts you. So to me, that is the story there, and how they handle the environment in Tallahassee, which I'm trying to think, and I would have to look back to the 24 regional, but maybe Caitlin Cochran and maybe Macy Miles is the only pitchers on this staff I can think of that may have pitched in the Tallahassee Regional in 24. That was a year where Sarah Willis and Caitlin Felton carried the load on that pitching staff, Bryson. So there's how Isabella Vega has never pitched in Tallahassee. Not that it's a, big deal, but that is something to watch this weekend, is how these pitchers handle the elements of being in Tallahassee.
Speaking of Tallahassee, let's talk about these hosts, shall we? Because the Florida State Seminoles were, I would argue, among the class of the ACC this year, which is a really strong softball conference. They practically swept most of the ACC's annual awards this year, in fact. So, and UCF has had a history of troubles with them. In fact, UCF has not beaten FSU since 2011. So it's been over a decade since the last time the Knights have beaten the Seminoles, and it looks like that they might have to contend with them if they want to make it out of this regional. So, Eric, what have you seen from FSU this year? What makes them such a tough team?
Well, a couple things. First, let's put that into context. You said they haven't beaten them since 2011. These two teams don't play every year. In fact, I'm trying to think the last time they played in a regular season game, because they've certainly played in the regionals in 24 and 23 and 21 in Tallahassee. But
They played in a February game in 2022.
oh, that must have been Clearwater. Was that the Clearwater Invitational one, an ESPN tournament? I think that's what it was.
The
That's
timing would
right.
line up.
Yeah, might have been there a couple years ago. So, but I don't even remember the last time FSU played in Orlando. The only Florida State Seminole that has shown up at the UCF softball complex in recent years is my broadcast partner, Alex Powers, who was an ACC player and two-time All-American. Shout out to her. She is not thrilled, by the way, that this regional is heading up, because she obviously wants UCF to do very well. So to answer your question of FSU, they arguably may have the National Player of the Year right now in Issa Torres, who's hitting 542, 16 home runs, 52 RBIs, 40 extra base hits, Bryson. You know how many errors she has made this year at shortstop?
I'm going to get single digits.
How about zero?
Yeah.
Zero. That is unbelievable. So she is a National Player of the Year. She sets the tone for their offense. That is somebody that certainly UCF's going to have to deal with. You got Jason Beecham, who is a good power hitter for them. Ashton Dantley, who's a two-way player. Dantley is a player that's a number two arm and also can hit for them. So they have an offense. They do what they do. They hit for a lot of extra doubles. And this year, in fact, they have hit 114 doubles, 62 home runs for the Seminoles, hitting 352. The interesting thing about FSU is they struggled with their pitching earlier in the year. Jazzy Franczyk, the ACC Pitcher of the Year, who's on the Canadian national team, or excuse me, I believe it's actually the British national team, really stepped up, 22 wins, 175 ERA. You got Danley, who's 2 ERA. The other pitchers are kind of suspect. They don't have the depth that they're accustomed to having, so they're probably going to ride Franczyk and Danley a lot in this regional, but they have really stepped up to their game, and that's why they were able to win the ACC regular season and the ACC tournament championship. I thought they should have been an 8 seed. They got the 9 seed instead. But Lonnie Alameda, who just got inducted to the Florida Sports Hall of Fame, by the way, and also in the NFCA Hall of Fame, a person that knows Cindy Ball-Malone very well from the time that Cindy Ball-Malone was at Pacific as a player, and Lonnie Alameda was a young assistant coach at Stanford back in the day. That's how far back they go. In fact, Lonnie Alameda was one of the references, I believe, in Coach Ball-Malone's resume when she got the UCF job, along with one Tim Walton. So they know each other. There's a history, very competitive there. And like I said, they're really tough to beat in that park at Joanne Graff Field. I mean, you can attest to this, Bryson. From a softball, that park is just as electric, close to what you experience when USCF baseball It was in the Tallahassee Regional in 2024 with Dick Hauser Stadium, Mike Martin Field. It's not to the level of baseball, but it's gotten pretty close to that with all the upgrades they've done to their facilities there, and that's why FSU's had a great home field advantage in their regionals all these years.
Now, one thing about FSU season that's really stood out to me about it is their big statement wins this year were a win against UCLA in Clearwater, and then they split their games against Florida this year. That Florida FSU rivalry. I mean, Florida, sure, we talk about football all the time, but man, Florida FSU softball has been pretty good, especially this year. And so, considering UCF played Florida and Florida handily won both of those games. When you look at FSU, what is UCF going to have to do if they have to find themselves against the Seminoles?
Well, play a lot better than they did against Florida. That was not that offensively. I thought that was two of their worst performances of the season. I think they'd be the first to tell you that, especially the second game in that two-game home and home with Florida. The first game was kind of misleading. That game was a tight game. Isabella Vega against Keegan Rothrock. A couple plays weren't made, and Florida was able to pull away late. But what they're going to have to do is swing the bats, stick to their game plan, try to play from ahead. One of the things UCF's had in past years, Florida State's a great front-running team, And what I mean by that is Florida State gets a lead, and they usually shut you down with their pitching. You don't want to fall behind in that park and try to deal with their pitching. So I think UCF needs to get off to a good start in all the games, quite frankly, especially if they run into Florida State. And then you're going to have to contain, to me, everybody on that FSU offense not named Issa Torres. I think Issa Torres, they're going to pitch around. I think Issa Torres is going to get hers. You can't let the others beat you. If they do, and then you tip your cap and you move, and that's the thing. If they beat you, you got no shot. So I think UCF's got to swing the bats. They got to swing the bats like they're capable of. I think the good news about UCF from this regional is this is the best offense that's played in that ballpark that UCF has brought. In past years when UCF has struggled in Tallahassee, they just couldn't score runs in that against Florida State in particular. But in that regional. So can they crack this FSU pitching staff if they get to them early? Because really what you're hoping for, honestly, if you're UCF, that's what the recipe is. Score some runs, timely hitting, and rely on Isa Vega's arm to either start the game and go to distance or come in relief for some of your young other pitchers and close the game out. And I think it's pivotal for UCF to stay on the winner's bracket side. Bryson, we covered them last year in Austin where they lost the first game to Michigan, but they rode Caitlin Felton and Isabella Vega out of the loser's bracket with those two arms and got to the regional final. But if you remember, the game before, to get to the regional final, they had to win a shootout against Michigan to get to the regional final. So, and then on Sunday they they were on empty tank and ran into the eventual national champions in the Texas Longhorns. So I think they got to stay on the winner's bracket. I think Vega's got to pitch well, and I think you're going to see UCF throw a lot of arms if Isabella Vega doesn't start. I think you'll see a committee approach, and that is the one thing. They have a lot of arms, and I think Coach Ball-Malone is not going to be shy to use them, and I think they're going to go with a lot of matchups in the games that Vega doesn't pitch, but I do think they will ride Vega to start some games and then also come in relief. I don't know what they'll do on Friday against Jacksonville State, if they'll start Vega to try to get off to a good start, or do they play a little gamble here and try to win that game without Vega starting? So maybe you save her if you can win that game without her to get to that winner's bracket game, potentially against Florida State. Because I think you're going to have to win a game, Bryson, that she doesn't start, I think, to get out of this regional.
No, yeah, I'd agree. I would agree as well. I mean, this pitching staff is much more than Isabella Vega in order if the Knights are going to make it out of this regional.
And listen, Lena Elkins has pitched well in the last month. I think Tori Payne has pitched pretty well. You've got Vakun, who's the lefty. You can use her matchups. Macy Miles has good off-speed stuff. Ava Stewie has won games beating Oklahoma State and Kansas, Bryson. The question is, How do they handle the regional environment? That'll be key there. If they pitch well, I think UCF has a shot to win this regional. If you see them free passes and kind of go, see some inexperience there, then uh, I think the result after that.
I want to talk. I know we talked a little bit about this Knights team over the course of this talk, where we talked about how they would contend with their opponents. But I want to really talk about the Knights on their own here. Who would you say is the biggest key for the Knights on this team for someone that we haven't mentioned yet? We talked about the pitching staff quite a bit. I think that goes without saying that Isabella Vega is a very big key to UCF coming out of this regional. But who on this UCF offense would you say is one of the biggest keys in the Knights getting out of this regional?
Who? I'm not going to mention the obvious names. Let's start with the core that drive in the runs, who have been magnificent. Sierra Humphreys, first team All Big 12. I think she's the best player on the team. She's number one second baseman this year in defensive runs saved, so she's been awesome defensively and then offensively. Beth Damon, who hit her 15th home run against Kansas in the Big 12 tournament, tying Jada Cody's 2022 season with 15 home runs. Only Stephanie Best has hit more home runs in a single season than Beth Damon has. You have Easy Mertez, who's two doubles away from the school record for most single season doubles, driven out over 40 runs, and then certainly Kendall Yardell. So those power hitters, they have to show up, they've got to hit, and if they do, they're going to be successful. But the keys, I think there's two players. I think one is the senior Aubrey Evans. She usually hits in the top of the order. She needs to get on base, do her thing, and set the table for those players. And then the other one, Bryson, your favorite, Coco Jaimes. Remember last year, Coco Jaimes struggled offensively. In her own words, said she probably, was over trying to do too much, had too much in her head, et cetera, et cetera. Started to hit a little bit, but, thinking in the regionals, somebody on this stream started questioning her getting at bats in that regional, and she tore it on. Had one of the greatest regionals that any Knight has ever had, and I think only made like 2 outs the entire regional. So if we get that Coco Jaimes, and she's had a good year this year, up and down, but she's had a solid year moving to third base. If we get Coco Jaimes again to perform in that level, well, first of all, then we start calling her Miss May, because that's been her month. But number two, that brings another element to this offense that she could provide as well. So I would say it's Aubrey Evans. And I'll throw another one. Ashley Griffin, a senior, has been the last active player on this roster that was part of that 2022 team that made it to the Super Regionals. She's had good postseason moments before, in particular in that regional where she hit the home run in the regional championship game that helped the Knights win that regional game. If she could have a good regional here, not too far away from Georgia, where she's from, she'll have a lot of family members there. So I think those three players, who don't get talked about as maybe as much, especially Griffin and Jaimes, if they have a good weekend, then I think UCF's going to have a really good weekend.
Considering that this team's strength has been hitting, while the pitching has been maybe relatively thin when it comes to quality, because obviously young pitchers, they can make young mistakes. So what's it been like covering this UCF team? Because both of those things, offense and then young pitching, can both be pretty inconsistent at times. So what's it like covering this UCF team, and does it feel like that this UCF team is overrated or underrated going into this regional?
Definitely underrated, because I think a lot of people pick Florida State to win this regional, and not my words, Alex Powers' words. She was on the ACC Network studio work this weekend, and on her podcast where she talks ACC, she says UCF and Florida State, they're pretty evenly matched. And she knows both. Nobody knows those two teams as well as she does. Having called games with me for the last 4 seasons at UCF, and then certainly, obviously, she calls games at FSU. Played there. Is going to be a future Hall of Famer there. I think the talent level has shrunk between Florida State and UCF. I think it's a lot closer than maybe people outside the state of Florida might realize. I think this is the best UCF offense that's ever played in a regional. Doesn't mean that I don't know what's going to happen, but this is by far the most difficult offense that Florida State if they play in this regional, will have ever seen from a UCF Knights team. So, I. But it's so weird, and it's weird to say that in that you have more questions about the pitching, quote unquote, than the offense. It's been usually the other way around, where UCF comes in with the pitching as the strength and questions about the offense. So it's been weird for me to cover this team in that regard, where I've been talking so much about offensive records that this team has set, from a single season home run record and runs scored and etc. Batting average, I think they're shattering that record. I think the record for offense was 301 batting average, Bryson. I believe they're 320 something right now. They're on pace to shatter that. So that's a thing that helps UCF, because in years past, when they haven't won a regional, is because they would lose a 3-0 game or a 2-0 game, or man, you just couldn't put enough pressure on the opponent. Well, this team can certainly win a 5-3, 6-4, 8-6 game. They've done it. Whereas past UCF teams couldn't do that in a regional. And that's what makes this so fascinating. Like, I think UCF can slug their way into a regional win that other UCF teams could not have done at all. That being said, that is, you need the pitching to complement this offense. And certainly when Isabella Vega, who's a first-team All-Big 12 performer, if she's on her game, they've got a shot to win this regional. And I think that's the good news there, is you're the underdog. And I think this team likes playing when first of all, they've played very well away from home this year. And I feel like when they're the underdog, which they're going to be in this regional, I feel like they play better that way, which is kind of weird to say. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just a conscious thing, but I think they'll get a chip on the shoulder, because I think everybody's going to pick Florida State, and I think they'll try to feed off of that.
Between the two mid-major teams, Stetson and Jacksonville State, who is the one that could give UCF the harder time?
It's an interesting question, because Stetson is the is the team. They're very familiar with each other. They play in the fall. They played this year. I don't think Stetson's intimidated by UCF. But Jacksonville State, on the other hand, is the team you don't know. They don't play each other. So that's a hard question, because they both present different challenges. And the interest, I don't, we also discuss, like, are we talking about Friday's game, for example? Are we talking about an elimination game on Saturday? Are we talking about, there's a lot of variables into this. Is UCF in an elimination game where they got to use multiple arms? I think Jacksonville State probably. That's a tough question. It's probably the more challenging team, because they're the unknown. You don't know as much about them as you know what Stetson brings to the table, if you're UCF from that standpoint. But that being said, I mean, Stetson's not going to be intimidated by UCF. I think that I know it sounds like a kind of a cop-out. I think this is one of the tougher regionals that's going to go under the radar this weekend in the entire country in the regionals.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, hey, we got the FIFA World Cup coming to the US of A this year. So in the vein of that, do you think that this regional would be the regional of death this year?
It can be, actually. I think that's a good comparison, because I could see a scenario where a Jacksonville State or a Stetson get to a regional final. I could also see a scenario where UCF and Florida State get bounced early in the regional. Does that make sense? Like, I
No,
do, right?
yeah, no, absolutely, no, absolutely. I mean, this is each team, I think, brings at least something to the table that could get them to a regional final, or even a super if the dominoes fall just right. And speaking of that, is this the type of regional where the dominoes are going to need to fall just right for UCF? Or do you think that this is a type of regional where they might be able to out talent their way at least to the regional final?
Both. I think they could out talent to get to a regional final, but you do need some luck there. The one thing I like about UCF's chances here, in years past, Florida State would play a 4 seed that was pretty much mismatch, and FSU had their way. So when UCF, on the other hand, had to play a tough 3 seed, so FSU had an edge there. If Stetson and I feel like we're having deja vu here, Bryson, because I could have sworn that you and I had the same exact similar conversation when you covered the baseball regional. Remember, you talked about how Stetson was kind of the key team in that regional because you were nervous about them against Florida State, and they gave Florida State a run for their money in that regional, if I remember correctly, and gave UCF a run for their money. UCF have to come from behind to win it and eliminate Stetson on that Sunday in baseball. I kind of feel it's the same way here in softball, where Stetson in softball this year is capable of upsetting a Florida State. They're capable of beating a Jacksonville State. They're capable of beating UCF. But let's say Stetson were to upset FSU and drop FSU to the losers bracket. I think that helps UCF a lot. And that's why I actually, I prefer, if you're on the road in a regional, I want the 1 seed to have as difficult of a game against the 4 seed as possible to make it easier for me to knock them off. What you don't want is when the 1 seed has a layup in their opening game and you got to fight and crawl to get over the hump against them. And I think in this regional, UCF could benefit from that for this difficult of a regional, because I think it's one that's going to sneak up on people, and they're going to be in the middle of this regional realizing, wow, can you believe how much difficult this regional is, or how good this regional is? So I think we might be in store for something very intriguing this weekend. And I think at the end of this week, it'll be like, wow, I didn't expect that either way. And I think that makes it for, I think, a fascinating regional.
You've covered this program for a very long time. What would making a super this season mean to this program?
Historic in that it would be the first UCF team to win a regional on the road. You would have knocked off a team that has really been your bugaboo in Florida State. Think back to 2015. UCF was I think they were 3 outs away from getting to the winners bracket game against FSU. Gave up a home run. They got walked off on a base hit by my now broadcast partner, Alex Powers, in the bottom of the 7th. We've become good friends. I've let it go, maybe to some extent. I have told her though that base walk off made me cry. But no, in all seriousness, she hits the walk off. They win 2-1 in that game. Brutal. That was Shelby Turner, and that was tough. I remember I literally, Bryson, got the headset down, turned off the equipment, walked out of the booth, and literally walked out to Dick Hauser Stadium. You've been to Dick Hauser. It's right next to the softball. I literally walked out and found the spot, and I watched it from the outfield bleachers, sat down, and watched an inning or two of the FSU Clemson game to calm myself down, because I had to come back and call a UCF elimination game in a couple of hours. So I gathered my thoughts, put it to that way. But so that was my memory. That was from 2015 in that regional. So yeah, that's to me the thing that's interesting there is it would mean a lot. You would get rid of a lot of those ghosts, the 2015 regional, the 21 regional, where that was Coach Ball-Malone's first NCAA tournament team, and they got to that regional final with Aaliyah White, ran into FSU, who ended up playing for the national championship that year. 2023, the 2024, they lose to FSU in the winners bracket game, have to come back and play a night game against Auburn where it goes 12 innings and it finishes at 3 in the morning. I would know. I was in the stands for that one as they lost to Auburn. So there's been a lot of pain in Tallahassee, but this team could rewrite history and change all that. And that would be what that would mean for this program. And in some ways, Bryson, in some ways, if they were to win this regional and eliminate Florida State, let's say, that in some ways might be even more special than the regional they won at home. As bizarre as that sounds, a case could be made because you went through a rival in the state, a place that you've had problems there in the past, and you erase that. That would be an interesting debate if they can do it. And this team could put the claim as, hey, maybe we're the best UCF softball team ever if they were to win this region on the road.
Yeah. You said that you were going to be heading up to Tallahassee to cover this regional. So tell the people where they can follow you to cover your adventures in Tallahassee this month.
Yeah, it's been interesting already getting a hotel. It's sold out at a lot of places. It's a packed weekend with FSU Miami baseball. But Eric Lopez Elo is the best place to follow it. I'll be traveling later this week and be providing updates on social media. I've got some obligation stuff I'm doing with D1Softball. I'll be doing all the press conferences. I'll be at all of them. We'll be doing interviews, hopefully, and I'll have some UCF content. Who knows, Bryson? Maybe you and I could do some videos while I'm in Tallahassee. We'll see how our schedules. I know you got a busy weekend yourself, but looking forward to it. I never take it for granted. Get the regionals and hope for the best for the Knights here to make some noise here and get one out of Tallahassee, which would be pretty sweet and historic. So that's why we do this stuff. We document history, and hopefully we get to see some this weekend. But it should be a fun regional with I think 4 teams that will represent their respective schools very well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Eric. You've been a great friend to me these past few years as I've been, entering this world covering UCF sports. And thanks for being the first your first guest on on the YouTube channel. Have fun in Tallahassee. Good luck to you, and yeah, good luck to this Knights squad as well as they try to make history to make it out to their second super regional in program history. Also, be sure to follow us at UCF Nights on SI. We're at UCF Nights on SI on Twitter and Facebook as well. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel and you're not have not liked the video or subscribed yet, maybe do that. That'd be pretty nice, and you'll be able to get notifications. Be sure to turn that notification bell on so you can be up to date on all the press conference videos we post on this channel, as well as hopefully more interview videos like this one that probably also might feature some more with Eric Lopez as well on UCF softball and maybe some other UCF sports in the future. Thank you so much for watching this. UCF starts their regional action on May 15th at 2:30 p.m. on ESPN Plus, and with the second round action to come the following day. Be sure to follow me at It's Bryson Turner on X for that kind of information as well, alongside at UCM Nights on SI on X. Thank you to Eric for joining us today. And have a safe weekend watching this regional. Good night and charge on.